In this special debut edition of 5 for Fun, I highlight 5 Dreamcast games that beat the statistical odds and had much higher sales than they had any right to. In a previous video, I ran a deep dive statistical analysis and generated a regression model, an explanatory model to determine what were the key variables that were related to high game sales on the Dreamcast. In other words, what were the key characteristics of Dreamcast games that could help to explain and predict individual sales levels. Some of the more important variables included the following: whether or not the game was a first-party published game. Controlling for other things, Sega published games could be predicted to sell many more copies than third-party games. The genre of a game. Some genres, like sports, sold incredibly well and could be consistently predicted to sell more than other genres, like driving games for instance. Whether or not the game got considerable levels of promotion, in the form of being on magazine covers and/or featured in commercials, a key factor in driving sales. Whether or not the game received very positive review scores. Sales could be predicted to go up with more positive reviews. And last but not least, when a game was released. Controlling for all of the variables, time frame for game release turned out to be a critical explanatory variable in sales success. Was the game released before the PlayStation 2 came out? Was it released after Sega's announcement that they were discontinuing the Dreamcast? Answers to these kinds of questions had big impact on sales levels. So in this video, I'm going to identify 5 games that, according to the statistical model, should have had very low sales, but in fact had high sales, meaning that they beat the odds. And just to give you a quick example of a game that did not beat the odds, let's look at Ducati World Racing Challenge. A game that came out late in the Dreamcast life cycle, far after the PlayStation 2 had been released and even after the Dreamcast had been formally discontinued. That's bad timing. It was also a game published by a third-party company, not Sega, Strike 2. And it got poor review scores, very poor actually. Strike 3. And let's even hit it with Strike 4. It did not get heavy promotion. Taking all of those variables together, and very low sales could be predicted by the statistical model for Ducati Racing. And in fact, that prediction would be correct, as the game only managed to sell around 18,000 units, far, far less than the average game would sell. And I'm going to use average Dreamcast game sales as a cutoff level for considering a game beating the odds. Average game sales on the Dreamcast were right around 107,000 copies sold. Now unfortunately, not many games did manage to beat the odds, but at least 5 of them did. And without further ado, here they are. Number 5. Slave Zero. Developed and published by Infogrames in October of '99, Slave Zero had a lot going against it. First, it's a non-Sega published game. It's third party. Second, it's apparently a pretty bad game. I haven't played it, but my opinion's irrelevant. What is relevant is that major reviewers at the time scored it poorly. On top of all that, it had very little promotion. Now given these variables, the game should have sold very poorly according to the statistical model. However, it managed to sell a respectable 123,000 copies. And maybe that doesn't sound like a lot, but only 56 other Dreamcast games sold more than Slave Zero. Have you played this one? If so, let me know what you think about it. Number 4. Evolution. One of just 13 role-playing games on the Dreamcast, Evolution came out in mid-December of '99. Developed by Sting and published by Ubisoft, it faced the same uphill battle as Slave Zero. Not a first-party game, very little evidence of promotion, and a pretty bad critical reception. All of the ingredients for a rough sales story. And yet, the game was able to sell 145,000 copies. Perhaps a testament to the appetite for role-playing games on the system. Anybody have any thoughts on this one? I have it in my collection, but I've yet to complete Skies of Arcadia, so I probably won't be getting to Evolution anytime soon. Number 3. Fighting Force 2. Developed by Core Design and published by Eidos in late November of '99, Fighting Force 2 had no business selling well. Another third-party game with little promotion and absolutely atrocious review scores. Now I grew up with games like Double Dragon and Streets of Rage, so I love a good beat 'em up. But this one doesn't seem to have that same aura. And yet, having said all that, the game sold 160,000 copies. Is this one as bad as the reviewers say? Were 160,000 people swindled out of their money? Or is the game a good beat 'em up that got a bad rap? Let me know because I haven't played it. Number 2. Test Drive 6. Racing games generally did rather poorly on the Dreamcast, with the average sales for the genre being a little under 90,000 per game. But Test Drive 6, developed by Pitbull and published by Infogrames, managed to beat the odds. Released in late November '99, this third-party game received little in the way of promotion and clocked in with an absolutely awful review score on IGN. Still, it sold just over 178,000 copies, and the franchise survived to fight another day on several platforms after the Dreamcast. Number 1. Sega Smash Pack Volume 1. Have you noticed that none of the games on this list so far came out after 1999? So while several games were able to overcome the other variables, so far none have managed to overcome the release window variable, until Smash Pack, a game that came out at the worst possible time. Not only did it come out after the PlayStation 2 had released, but it launched on the same day that Sega announced they were discontinuing the Dreamcast. Any game released during that time, statistically speaking, should have tanked. Now pile on top of that the game itself received less than stellar reviews, and in some instances very, very bad reviews. Plus it had very little big push advertising, meaning it should have all been a recipe for disaster, even for a first-party game. But it wasn't a disaster. Smash Pack sold a whopping 181,000 copies. To put that in perspective, only 40 other games sold more than that on the Dreamcast, meaning that it sold better than 84% of the rest of the library. Smash Pack is a true underdog story. Before I go, I want to give honorable mention to the 2K Sports series. Although we can't say that any of those games necessarily beat the odds, because after all they were first-party published, had great review scores, and they were all sports games, we can say that they did manage to weather the storm of the PlayStation 2 release and the Dreamcast discontinuation. In fact, the last entries in the series, which all came after the system had been discontinued in 2001, all sold incredibly well. A true testament to how good those games were and how many people knew how good those games were. That's it for me. Thank you very much for watching. If you found this content engaging, please consider a subscription. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, all the best and the sky's the limit.